Hey, people, Noah here from your favorite podcast, Stick Drift, here to deliver to you a fresh and awesome crash course. Today, we're going to be talking about visual novels, why you should start reading them, because I really don't think that the medium is being advertised enough and doesn't quite get a lot of reception compared to other mediums of entertainment, and I want to talk about why I think that it should be a relevant medium. So I'm just going to get right into it. So why visual novels? Well, it's kind of something that came about, for me at least, as sort of a response to just when I was in high school, I just kind of got burnt out on other forms of media, and I was like, I liked this. I liked some anime that were derived from visual novels, like Steins and Higurashi When They Cry, and so I was like, well, maybe I'll like this visual novel thing. And so I sat down and I think the first one I ever read was more of in response to my avid 4chan usage at the time, and it was the Katawa Shoujo that I actually forgot to put on this list here. That's right. I'm gonna briefly talk about it anyways. So Katawa Shoujo was a freeware visual novel produced by 4chan's one of 4chan's boards. I think it was the anime board, but I could be wrong. But they just got together and decided to put together a visual novel, and I think that was probably the first experience I had with the genre, and it was pretty different from what I had been used to, because that sort of storytelling I had gotten mostly from RPG Maker games. That was kind of what I was familiar with up until then, and so I sort of just decided to try it out, and it was really interesting, and I really enjoyed Katawa Shoujo back in the day, around when it came out, and they've got that re-release on Steam now, and I have yet to reread it, but from what I recall, it was a really good experience. So, but with that side tangent aside, that's sort of like my start with the visual novel medium, and I mean, I haven't gone too deep into the medium enough to really call myself an expert or anything like that. I'm not. I just want to talk about it because I think that it's interesting, and that's what I'm going to do here. So, but why visual novels compared to something else? Well, it was kind of recently I was playing through Persona 5, and I've had kind of this slump of trying to get into like various popular JRPGs. And I mean, I like a lot of JRPGs. I like a lot of like Persona and things like that. But I mostly like PlayStation 1 JRPGs and the like the Bravely series and the Octopath series, stuff like that. Stuff that really streamlines the JRPG format. But I found myself kind of just wanting to experience the story rather than deal with all the gameplay mechanics. I just was not feeling the gameplay mechanics. And so I had recently discovered that it was about maybe 2 or 3 weeks after the Steam remaster of Fate Stay Night came out that I was like, oh, hey, I remember this because I've read this before and I really like this series. And so I was like, you know what? JRPGs aren't really working for me, but I want to experience a deep story. I'm just going to reread Fate Stay Night. And so I did. I hooked it up to my CRT and I sat down and started reading Fate Stay Night. Well, I was actually reading it on my Steam Deck for quite a while. For about maybe half of the first route. And then I hooked it up to the CRT because I'm like, yeah, this seems like a fun way to experience this. And it was really nice getting to read through that again. The last time I had read that, I'm kind of jumping around here in timelines, but the last time I had read Fate Stay Night was in high school, right before going to college. Actually, it was after high school. It was when I graduated high school. Would have been when I read it last, but I really enjoyed Fate Stay Night, and that Steam remaster of the Rialto Nua PSP port really got me thinking of how VNs, while they started as sort of a medium for adult content, and they sort of had to shoehorn a lot of erotic elements into them in order for them to get greenlit and to sell, or so they thought that they had to shoehorn those elements. But I'm here to talk about why I don't think that the medium needs those sort of erotic elements to sell, just as how other mediums like anime, manga, JRPGs, those mediums don't need erotic elements either in order to sell. So why should VNs be any different? In the stories that can be told with a VN, I feel like it's a lot deeper of a narrative. Because of the way things are described in a VN, I think that you can do a lot of things with the medium that can't quite be done in any other medium, whether that's a JRPG or an anime or a manga or even just like a traditional novel. I just don't see those mediums being able to quite capture the depth of inner thoughts that I find in the VNs that I've read and the VNs that I enjoy. It's especially true with something like Fate Stay Night, where I really think that Natsuverse sort of style is really just incredible in its depth of storytelling. So, and its depth of world building as well. But I'll try not to get too much into the weeds on that for this video, because I just want to talk about things that I think that either I'm interested in experiencing because I haven't quite experienced them yet, or things that I love and I really want to talk about. So I'll just briefly go over some things that I think that people should be playing. And before I do that, though, I just want to kind of talk about some stuff that I wouldn't consider a strict, like, visual novel per se, but I do find these things interesting, and I want to get deeper into them at some point. So we'll just start off with the Ace Attorney series. So my first experience with this was actually on the 3DS, those remasters that they put out there, and I might have got through the full first or second games of that series, but I remember getting stuck on one of the sort of in-trial puzzles, and I couldn't quite figure out how to get the correct evidence presented, and so unfortunately I put the game down, and I haven't gone back to it since. But I really like the style of gameplay, and I find it really interesting, the stories they are able to tell in that sort of courtroom setting, and the even outside the courtroom setting when you're doing the investigation portions. It's a really interesting concept. I wouldn't call it a strict visual novel, but I would recommend checking out, and I want to try checking the series out again as well. Give it another shot. But speaking of the DS and 3DS, they also had the Zero Escape series on there. Now, I don't know too much about this series, but I've just heard that it's a fantastic series to try and get into, and so I just wanted to kind of mention it here. this is just me. A lot of this is just going to be me throwing out things that I have interest in, and just so that people can like look into them and have some ideas of where to start if they're wanting to get into VNs. But one final entry that I'll talk about is the Danganronpa series. I probably pronounced that wrong, but it's a pretty popular one. The only thing I can think of with this series is that guy with his... he's got the house that has like all the cutouts of the one girl that like dies at the very beginning of the first game or something. I don't know. That's all I can think of. It's pretty funny if you haven't seen that sort of house. The guy just kind of does it as a joke. He makes like cutouts of a lot of anime girls, but he's got like a church dedicated to this character that like has no like staying power in the story whatsoever. So it's pretty funny to me. But so yeah, those are kind of things that I wanted to talk about briefly. But here's some sort of honorable mention things or stuff that I'm like really looking forward to in the strict VN genre, getting the time to read, or things that are derived from things that I like. So I've seen the entire sort of trilogy of Chaos, I think it was Chaos Child, and then Steins Gate, and then Robotics Notes. Those three shows, I mean, specifically Steins Gate, but I also remember enjoying Robotics Notes quite a bit. Those were all based off of visual novels, and that's a series that I'm looking forward to reading. I haven't read the series for any of those yet, but the animes were great, and so especially Steins Gate, that's a classic. But they also have a newer one, Anonymous Code, in that same series, so I'll have to check that out too when I'm reading through that series. But I don't think that got an anime adaptation like the others did. But so for some sort of like darker themed stuff, because the VN format is really good, I think, at portraying horror more so than any game series. Definitely better than anime, and maybe better than manga. I'm not quite sure yet. I haven't experienced enough horror manga personally to say for sure, but I've experienced enough horror anime to know that anime is not really a good medium for horror, in my opinion. I just think that the overall vibrance of the like art styles and characters just don't lend themselves too well to horror. Like there's not that suspension of disbelief to where like, oh, this could fill me with dread, or this could be real. It just does. I just don't get that feeling with anime. I talked about that on the larger podcast as well a little bit, but so I'm sorry to all horror anime fans out there, but hey, maybe somebody will find something that I'll like for me someday, and I'll change my mind on it. But for now, I want to talk about some sort of horror visual novels. So on this list, I've got Saya no Uta, Song of Saya. That just it's on Steam, and it is a shorter one. It's like maybe like 7 hours from what I understand, but I have watched a YouTube deep dive on this one, and it definitely seems like it'd be right up my alley. It's sort of like a guy has some sort of like mental condition to where he thinks that everything is made of like fleshy creatures stuff, and like it's alive and fleshy, like everything in the world. And then there's just like one girl that isn't fleshy, but then like it turns out that she is a flesh alien, and that like because of his like messed up perception of things, he sees the flesh alien as like not fleshy. So I don't know. It was pretty interesting when I watched sort of like a in-depth deep dive on it, and so kind of wanted to mention here. It's something that I'm really looking forward to getting the time to read at some point, but and it's short enough to where you can just kind of like binge it, so that's what I'm hoping to do. But it's definitely horror, grotesque, not for the faint of heart sort of thing. Similarly, I've got Tsukihime on this list. Wonderful Every Day, Down the Rabbit Hole. I don't know much about this one. It's been recommended to me quite a bit from different online circles I'm in, as well as it has some like deep philosophical undertones to it from like really strange sides of philosophy that have to do with like deep mathematical formulas for explaining the world around us, and it's just such a weird like thing because it just like presents itself as like this normal fluffy visual novel, but from what I understand, like it's like a rabbit hole. The deeper down you get into the novel, the crazier it gets, and it's got a lot of like not necessarily horror themes, but it deals with some really dark topics, and so it's not something for the faint of heart. But I want to mention it on here because it seems really fascinating to me, and I'm looking forward to getting the chance to read it. I don't know nearly as much about this one as Song of Saya, but I still want to talk about it because it seems like a really weird entry. But one entry that I do have quite a bit of experience with is Higurashi When They Cry. So I watched this anime series back in the day, and I really enjoyed it. I say that horror doesn't work with anime, but this show, it doesn't really fill me with horror, but it's got all the right elements to be at least creepy, and it's a disturbing show, and so it's one of the better examples of the genre in anime, and so I really want to read the visual novel to see just how deep they can get into the sort of the visceral deaths that are abundant in the show. And similarly, I get back and forth on whether Umineko, the related series to Higurashi, is better or worse, but it's like a completely different setting, different characters, but I'm also interested in that series. I haven't messed with that series yet, but it's part of that, or it's at least maybe like the same author as Higurashi, but it's another horror entry. Last on here I have, so back in ye olden days of the 2000s, there was a show that kind of was like, started off as your typical school anime, but spoilers, it devolves very quickly into very murder, death, kill ending, and very, very strange like plot beats. And that's because they based it off the bad ending of a visual novel called School Days. And I really thought this thing was like crazy back in the day, but I never got around to reading the visual novel for it. But from what I hear, the visual novel is sadly just like, I mean, it's your typical anime visual novel, so I probably won't get around to reading it, but I wanted to mention it here because the anime was just so bonkers of a concept and threw like everyone watching it back in the day for a loop, and it was just such an interesting take on a visual novel adaptation, adapting the bad ending where the, spoilers, main guy is killed because he got too many women pregnant. So yeah, it's pretty crazy, but yeah, jealousy and rage and stuff like that. I think it did the yandere thing sooner than Mirai Nikki, so it's pretty interesting for that. That genre really took off after Mirai Nikki. Sorry, Yume Nikki is a great RPG Maker game, but that's besides the point. But yeah, so that's School Days. I don't know if I'll ever get around to reading it, but I wanted to mention it here. But yeah, and then just briefly, I'm going to mention Muv-Luv. I don't know much about this. I just know that it has like a bonkers like sort of a spin-off series of alternative, and like it seems like it just goes really like crazy direction with the whole like over the top genre, of like adding in like every single like supernatural or sci-fi element you possibly could, packing it into like the universe of the mostly normal, just like high schooler setting that was Muv-Luv, the like first one. So I don't know much about it, but it just seemed weird enough to where I wanted to mention it on here. Yeah, and then I mean I've got like a Kanon on here. I don't know much about that one. I think it's just like a classic, just sort of one heroine visual novel, and then there's but I don't know much about it. But then there's Clannad. I think that's like a sort of a spiritual successor to Kanon. I've got that on here as well. I've heard that one's pretty sad. Prepare to cry with that one, but I never watched the anime adaptation of Clannad, so I don't know much about it. So yeah, those are just things I wanted to honorable mention. And I'm gonna kind of try to speed things up because I guess I'm already 20 minutes into this thing. But so I'm just gonna briefly go over some stuff that yeah, I mean, a lot of people like these things, and I'm sure if I gave them time, I would at least be able to appreciate them. But I just think that these are the sorts of things that puts VNs into a bad position of not being able to be taken seriously by the general wider audience of like media in general, especially like anime and JRPG and manga fans. But yeah, so just and these first few entries are kind of to a lesser extent. These are more better examples of that better visual novel format. But Doki Doki Literature Club is one that gets thrown around a lot as like a sort of a must play, and it seems interesting enough, but it just also just seems like it's a bit cliched in what it's trying to do. Like it's trying too hard to be subversive to me, but I don't want to give it too much shade because I haven't actually sat down to read it yet, and so I'm sure it's a great game for those who really enjoy it. But I'm just going to talk about it here in this section because I don't think that it represents all of what visual novels can be. It uses it to just produce this sort of minimalistic approach to the genre that just makes it seem like a one-off thing rather than a deeper genre that can have these long spanning stories that I'll get into in sort of the next section of games that I think are absolutely must plays. But so I've got Needy Streamer Overload on here. This could have gone into the stuff that I talked about earlier, like Ace Attorney, where it's like barely a VN, but I'm putting it on here because that's another one that's like I'm sure it's got its I know it's got its fans, but it just seems like it doesn't really do a whole lot with the depth that a VN can have. It just sort of like has this sort of reactionary like, oh yeah, it's a cute girl that you can have do all this weird like stuff with like making her into a streamer and stopping her from killing herself or something like that. I don't know too much about it, so I can't say too much about it, but it's just not for me right now. But I want to discuss it here for people who might be interested in it. And it's a very popular one too, so I want to at least show that I know about it. And it's definitely, these are definitely things that are on my radar to eventually get around to checking out. And lastly, for this section, Slay the Princess. That's supposed to be a pretty subversive one. And the art style looks amazing. Like it's really well done for the art style, but it's again one of those just like it might be trying too hard to be subversive, but I don't want to say that before actually experiencing it myself. So but so these three, I mean, I think that they're definitely valuable games, but I think they pull away from the genre's ability to produce these sort of well thought out and lengthy novel like stories that they're named for. And I think the examples that I'll give later in this podcast will be better suited to demonstrating what the visual novel medium can do, aside from things like, JRPGs, manga, and anime. Then things I really just, they grind my gears. And I know, I don't want to say these are bad necessarily, but I think they hurt the genre more than they help it become relevant, because of their just sheer parody without. Sometimes I feel like the wider audience isn't aware that these are sheer parodies, and so things like Hatoful Boyfriend took off and absolutely just made a laughingstock of the genre. And there's even like modern examples like Hooked on You, the Dead by Daylight dating's visual novel sort of thing that, like, I don't know, it just, I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of work and time and care put into these projects, and they have each of them has big audiences, and there's other parody visual novels as well that are like these, and I just think that they hurt the credibility of the genre more than they help raise awareness of the genre and what the genre brings to the world we call entertainment. So but finally, after all that, depressing crap out of the way, and I'm really not trying to bring any of these games down. I that's why I'm talking about them here, is because they do have relevance to the genre, and everything is part of this whole ecosystem of visual novels, and so they're important to talk about and to think about and to see, what lessons can we learn from what worked with these things and what didn't work. And I think the following examples are things that absolutely work with visual novels. And so I talked briefly about Katawa Shoujo, and that sort of setting of being at this school for the disabled, and dating these sort of people with disabilities. I think that that's a beautiful thing. It really expounds on the importance that people living with disabilities are just normal people like you and me, and they can have these deep relationships, and just as valuable to society as everyone else. And so it's really important to expound that for a lot of people. I mean, I was around on 4chan when this thing was like released, and it really showed them like, wow, that we were thinking about this all wrong. A lot of these sort of shut in nerds, it taught them that, like, hey, the world is bigger than just myself and my narrow understanding. And so it's the sort of game that really brings that to the forefront of people. And so I would definitely recommend that just for that alone. But it's also just like a pretty short experience. The routes don't take very long, and the art's great, and they just got a Steam release that removes all the adult content, and so I definitely recommend checking out that Steam release. And if you're just looking for like a traditional sort of dating sim experience, that or visual novel experience with those dating elements, that just lives up to the medium's ability to flesh out the inner monologues of its protagonist and really just flesh out its world in a very deep way and a very thought-provoking way. It's been a while since I've read it personally, and I wanna give it some time in the near future again. But for now, I can safely recommend that Steam release of Katawa Shoujo. But so let's talk about one of my favorite, and this would probably be better in the sort of non-visual novel section, but I'm going to talk about it here anyways because this is my sort of list. And VA11 Hall A Valhalla, cyberpunk bartending simulator. I absolutely adore this game. Its art, its atmosphere, and its soundtrack. Oh, that soundtrack. It's just... Soundtracks are something that brings me into a game. Like, if a game doesn't have a great soundtrack, then I have a tough time with it. It's a reason why a lot of, like, larger known RPGs I have a tough time getting into, like Final Fantasy VII. And don't get me wrong, Final Fantasy VII has a good soundtrack, but it's not something that sticks with me like something like Bravely Default or Octopath Traveler or Persona, the series in general. I mean, that series just has banger after banger after banger. I don't think there's been a Persona game with a bad soundtrack, but games have to have a great soundtrack for me, and to be really pulled into them, and for them to be really memorable to me. And Valhalla definitely delivers with that. It's a beautiful soundtrack, and just the indie nature of it is incredible with what they are able to do in the medium of this sort of story telling from a bartender's perspective. It's you just make connections with the characters that you're serving beverages to, and it's just a really good time. And I really love the world of Glitch City, and I'll talk about it later when I try and wrap things up with sort of things I'm looking forward to. But looking forward to that sequel, Nirvana. But anyways, so yeah, that's Valhalla. I'd love to go deeper into it, but I really just want to give a brief overview of these things so people can experience them for themselves. But that is a must-play from me. Also on this list, I've got the first of... Well, I'm going to be talking about 3 Nasuverse games. I think it's a Kinoku Nasu is the scenario writer for all of these, and sort of the architect behind these next 3 visual novels. And that sort of Nasuverse expands beyond the visual novel medium, but to really deeply understand that sort of Nasuverse that I love a lot, you really gotta indulge in at least Tsukihime and Fate Stay Night. So Tsukihime, what is it? Well, it is a story of a kid that he gets into an accident, and he wakes up in a hospital, and he starts seeing lines on everything. And these are like lines that if he cuts them, anything that is cut along these lines is destroyed. And that is such an interesting premise. And it goes back to sort of Nasu's ability to have this deep sort of intertwined system of world building and magic, and all the systems that he uses are reused in Fate Stay Night and in Mahoyo, or Witch on the Holy Night, and they're reused in interesting ways where you can really follow along as a fan of this Nasuverse and be like, oh yeah, this fits in here, and oh, this wraps around from this this sort of story. This is I'm glad I read this story because now I understand this part of the Nasuverse, or I'm glad I played this game or watched this series so I can understand this part. But so that whole like intertwining nature, honestly, I think it's something that can give something like the critically acclaimed Trails series. It's, well, maybe not critically acclaimed, but it's definitely a cult following series that is able to intertwine in its lore and its world building, and I think not the Nasuverse gives that a run for its money. So anyone that is a fan of that series, I think would really like to deep dive into the Nasuverse. And a great place to start is Tsukihime. There is no version of this that the original version of this is an adult game, and it stems from that sort of belief that back in when this was released in the early 2000s that these types of games had to have the erotic elements in them. From what I've researched, that was never Nasu's intention, was these games to be driven by the erotic elements, but rather they were sort of a necessary evil to get his games greenlit and published, but and sold. But I think any adaptations that forego those elements definitely hold up, and they have that remake of Tsukihime. It's on the Switch right now. I'm waiting for it to come to PC because I like to buy things on PC personally, but I really want to check out that remake because they're kind of doing it in the way that Final Fantasy VII is doing their remake, except they're splitting it into two parts. And so you should definitely check out that first part if you're Switch only, or if you're just not on PC or you don't really care. Check out that remake because it looks amazing, and I'm tempted to just bite the bullet and get it on Switch and dive into it right away, but I'm really hoping that they move that to PC, because I think it would sell really well, because well, that transitions pretty well into the next game on this list, and this is the game. If you take away anything from this, definitely experience this visual novel, because Fate Stay Night is one of the best stories that has ever been written. I absolutely adore Fate Stay Night, and you really need to engage with that visual novel to deeply understand all of the mechanics of the world and the characters of the world, and to just really get into the head of the characters, and especially the protagonist, Shiro Emiya. Fate Stay Night is just a phenomenal experience. It really highlights what a visual novel can be. It has the highs of the sort of friendly dating aspects of, like, oh yeah, there's pretty girls you can talk to, that would never happen in real life, right? but in the world of VNs you can talk to these pretty girls. But no, it really it really has a deep reverence for the sort of medium that is the medium of a novel, and it deeply explains everything that's happening in a scene, what's going on in the main character's head. It's a 90-hour novel, so you really got to sit down and give it your time, but it's a very rewarding experience. I've read through it twice now, and both times I just absolutely loved it and was just wanting more. And so if you take anything away from this, definitely give Fate Stay Night a read. it is a deeply rewarding experience. It has those highs of the fight scenes, the dating aspects, and then it has those like visceral at bad endings and death sequences, and it just goes into so much detail that really no other medium can, and they can get away with it because they're just describing these scenes. But I mean, some of these scenes are just described in such an awesomely gruesome way. If you're a fan of that sort of thing, then I definitely recommend checking out Fate Stay Night. Or even if you're not, you can skip through the gruesome death scenes if you're not interested in that. But those action sequences, the world building, the lore of it, and Fate Stay Night in particular with its really cool heroic servants that or the heroic spirit servants that are based off of mostly based off of like mythical heroes from real world history. It's really cool. And I'm a big history buff myself, so I really enjoy the throwbacks in the Fate Stay Night series. And I mean, it's a series that's gone on to become like a pretty big multimedia franchise, but that original visual novel, I think, is the pinnacle of Fate Stay Night. And everything after that's great and fantastic, and I love the whole of the Fate Stay Night universe and the Nasuverse in general, but that original novel is what really sticks with me and makes me think that the visual novel medium as a whole is deserving of a lot more respect than it gets from just the general public, I think. So yeah, it's Fate Stay Night. And then I want to talk about one that because I played through Fate Stay Night recently on that Steam remaster, that Rialto Nua Steam remaster, but they also released recently the first English translation of what I understand is Nasu's latest work, and that is Mahoyo, or Witch on the Holy Night. And I didn't know anything about this novel going into it, besides that it was Nasuverse, and so but it turns out that going back to Tsukihime, beginning of that game, Shiki, the main character, that sees the sort of lines that can be cut, he struggles with seeing those lines. It kind of freaks him out, and so there's a witch that gives him a pair of glasses that stops that sort of the Nasuverse refers to it as a mystic eyes, but it stops that power from working, essentially, when he has those glasses on. And so, but they take that witch character that's just like briefly in the prologue, and she might also be in like the follow-up that I never got around to, Kagetsu Tooya, but I'm not too sure. But so they took her and put her into her own sort of prequel novel to, I guess you could call it a prequel novel to Tsukihime in that way, but it's really not related that much to Tsukihime. It's its own standalone thing, really, about that witch from the beginning, and it really stood out to me because it is a VN that has 0 gameplay elements. In fact, it is more of a kinetic novel, so maybe it shouldn't even be on this list. But to where it's got the sort of the sight and sound, and then there's no choices in it whatsoever besides an extra very end of the game murder mystery portion. But I absolutely loved this experience, and this would be a if you're wanting more after reading Fate Stay Night, definitely check out Witch on the Holy Night, because it's just a great read. If you just want something to read without having to interact whatsoever with it, you can just read it, and it's maybe 25 or 30 hours of reading, I think. But it's got a really deep story, and the cast is awesome, and it just has so many like twists and turns. Like you think you know what's gonna happen, but then it's like, oh, what? Like it blew my mind. Just the roller coaster that was Witch on the Holy Night. So and it's Christmas themed, so maybe I'll bring it up in a Christmas themed podcast in the future of what things you should be checking out in the Christmas season, because yeah, the Holy Night that it refers to, that's Christmas. So there you go. But I really like all three of those Nasu First games are really worth checking out. Especially the newer releases of them. I really think that they're great experiences. Great soundtracks too. I love the soundtracks. I actually have a physical CD of the Fate Stay Night soundtrack, that original one, not that Reality Nua one, which the Reality Nua one's fine, but that original like soundtrack is like timeless. So but anyways, yeah, so that's must play visual novels. I'll just go ahead and wrap this up by saying that I hope that I was able to highlight why you should care about visual novels, and I just think that this medium doesn't get the attention it deserves. You can tell a really deep story in a visual novel from a very personal perspective that just doesn't happen in other mediums, because a lot of things are happening from that sort of first person's perspective in a visual novel, and so you get to hear like a lot of like inner monologue of the characters and like the protagonists of these novels, and it just lends itself to a really deep form of storytelling. And there's things like supplemental things inside of visual novels as well, like detailed descriptions of things. And I didn't even get to talk about like the really awesome things like the bad ending dojos in Fate Stay Night, and the wonderful world of ploys in Mahoyo. And I think, if I remember right, Tsukihime also had some sort of bad ending, like dojo scene, or maybe it was like a school setting. But either way, just the subversive way that they really are able to joke about their own game world in the sort of bad ending scenes. They're very far removed from the scene you just watched typically, because they're typically very lighthearted compared to like the gruesome like game over scene that you just watched. But there is one in particular that I'll just briefly mention that cracked me up. Was it was one that you had to basically bomb your relationship with Saber during the Fate route in Fate Stay Night, and they're basically like, yeah, if you got this dojo, you either are really bad at this game, or you actually like had to seek this thing out. And it was just like so in other words, we're just kind of causing a lot of trouble for completionists. And I'm like, yeah, it's just the way that I can't quite convey the way that they phrased it, but it just had me rolling. And then there was in Mahoyo, there was one wonderful world of ploys in particular that, so the game has like this bookshelf of sort of like chapters that you can select, and you just select a new chapter to go to the next chapter of the game, and not really a game, but go to the next chapter of the novel. And so there's one wonderful world of ploys where the girl Alice is all like, they kind of chibify the characters make him like small and like blobby for the these sort of bad ending dojos typically, but this scene in particular has the girl grab the bookshelf and smack this I think she smacks like the sort of mascot bird character of Mahoyo with the bookshelf. It's just like the actual like image, like sprite image of the bookshelf, and it had me cracking up. Like that's a great way to do like subversion and just like keep people on their toes. It's like, yeah, just take actual game UI elements and just smack characters with it. Like, what better way to break the fourth wall? It just cracked me up. But so yeah, that's sort of going into depth on visual novels and why I think you should care about them and why I think they're important. And I'll briefly mention things that are coming up, like I'm really looking forward to Nirvana, that Valhalla sequel, or it's not really a sequel per se, but it's by the same creator in the same sort of world, but it's not really the same setting. But so I'm looking forward to that. They have announced a remaster coming up of Fate Hollow Ataraxia, which is a sort of a sequel to Fate's Day Night that came out back in the day. I never got around to reading that sequel. I know it's shorter than the original, but I'm really looking forward to that because that is sort of a big part of that Nasu verse, along with Kagetsu Tooya and Tsukihime. Those four in particular show up a lot in things such as one of my favorite comedy anime, Carnival Phantasm, if not my favorite comedy. It probably is my favorite comedy anime, to be honest, but I love Carnival Phantasm. But characters from those four series in particular are used throughout Carnival Phantasm, and so you can enjoy Carnival Phantasm without knowing the series, by all means, but knowing the series that the characters come from definitely adds to sort of the comedy that is inside of Carnival Phantasm. And similarly, there's the fighting game series Melty Blood that a lot of people really like. I haven't been able to take a deep dive into the Melty Blood fighting game series, but there's a lot of Tsukihime influence in there. So a lot of people like that series, though. So yeah, Hollow Ataraxia remaster is coming. I'm waiting for that Tsukihime remake, part 1, to come out on PC. Sort of the routes with Arquid and CL. I think they call it the near side of the moon, is what they call those two routes. But they haven't done a remake of, or they haven't released the remake yet of the far side of the moon routes, which is sort of inside of the girls inside the mansion that Shiki is staying in during the events of the novel. So, but from what I've heard, that first remake is incredible, and I really want to check that out. But they kind of just like double the length of the story in a very meaningful way, and they're able to really tell a deeper story than even the original Tsukihime could, from what I understand. So it's really cool. But yeah, I've mentioned Kagetsu Toya. I'm hoping they do a remake of that, because that's also like canon Nasuverse that I haven't checked out yet. But it's sort of a sequel to Tsukihime in that same setting, so hopefully they'll remake that. And then, from what I understand, Nasu is also working on another sort of novel project that's in the same Nasuverse, but not like a sequel to anything. So whenever that comes, I will definitely be checking that out. But But yeah, this has been a lot of Nasuverse rant, and it's kind of like my ballpark. But I wanted to talk about the genre as a whole in here, not because I'm some sort of like expert on it, but because it's an interesting genre, and I really do think that people need to give it time and check it out. Especially if you're just in a sort of a rut of like, hey, I am kind of sick of just mashing through the gameplay of JRPGs, or I don't really have any sort of anime or manga that are interesting to me right now. Go ahead and do yourself a favor, even if you've already seen any of the anime adaptations of Fate Stay Night. Go ahead and play that visual novel on Steam, because it's incredible just how different it is and how much deeper you realize that the narrative can be when in a sort of a visual novel format. So yeah, that's been VNs and why you should care about them. Yeah, thanks for listening. Catch us next time on the pod. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about this crash course. See ya.